To incite hatred in any way, shape or form, political, social, national or any other, is a darkly blasphemous enterprise, and all the more blasphemous as the procedure by which this is carried out is more practiced, more eloquent, more elaborate. The age we live in is extremely serious. Therefore, it seems that in our age, every manifestation of evil possesses some special magical power to grow enormously and to multiply monstrously. And that is why, on those who, in our age, lead the way in inciting and supporting evil, and on their petty followers and countless epigonies, remains a moral responsibility so hard that it seems as if even a long eternity of suffering will not redeem it.
Ksenija Atanasijević was the first woman in Serbia who obtained PhD in philosophical sciences, the first female assistant professor at the University of Belgrade, actively engaged in the development and dissemination of feminist, pacifist and anti-fascist ideas. Although exposed to misunderstanding in her social environment, she boldly endured in her vision. She developed her philosophical ideas and actively fought for social justice, women's rights and pacifist ideals. She participated in activities of numerous women's organisations in Yugoslavia and the Balkans, and participated in their formation. She mercilessly condemned war and militarism. In 1933, she was among the first European intellectuals to loudly warn and protest against the coming evil, fascism and anti-Semitism. Her pacifist and feminist ideas were deeply grounded in ethics, in the universal value of the human person, as well as in psychological and anthropological insights into human nature.
Viewed from the eminently philosophical perspective, war appears as one of the most disgusting and ruthless manifestations of selfishness, blindness, and all kinds of negativity, which are fatally rooted in human nature. Therefore, all justifications of war, undertaken from various points of view, which are always consciously or unconsciously malevolent, are immoral and blasphemous. In addition, they all impose a misunderstanding of the basic ethical position that the personality of every living being must be respected.
Ksenija Atanasijević, born on February 5, 1894 in Belgrade. She graduated from the State Girls' Grammar School in 1911-1912. She started publishing her works during her high school days. Her first work was published in 1911. It was a translation of the poem Troika by the Russian poet Nikolai Nekrasov. In 1912, enrolled in philosophy studies at the Faculty of Philosophy of the University of Belgrade. Studies were interrupted in 1914. Due to the beginning of the First World War, faculty courses resumed in 1919.
Severely materially exhausted and psychologically and ethically desperately torn, humanity needs and craves for an urgent help. And it must start from the refinement and purification of the interior life, which will develop concurrently with the just reorganization of existing circumstances, where all members of society will be guaranteed economic security and individual freedom. For this enterprise of the most serious spiritual and material impact and importance, women possess indisputable abilities, sufficiently unused for the improvement of life until our age, due to the self-sufficiency of men.
In 1919, Ksenija Atanasijević chose the topic of her doctoral thesis, the teaching of the Renaissance philosopher Giordano Bruno on the triple minimum, presented in his work De triplica minimo et mensura, published in Frankfurt in 1591. Since in Belgrade there were no conditions for researching Bruno's works, in 1920, Ksenija Atanasijević went on a study visit in Geneva. The same year she returned to Belgrade and graduated in philosophy, after which she briefly worked at a grammar school.
And as long as the human individual does not carry an inner value within himself, a value independent of external means of encouragement and completion or external gratification, he will not achieve his full moral and social capacity. However, above all, for the indestructible formation of a better society, it is for women to acquire that ability in as good a number as possible, and they will reach it only by radically rejecting the delusions about themselves and orienting themselves towards the truth. which is always essentially incomparably stronger than all deceptions and all the turmoil of life.
She then went to Paris to continue her doctoral studies. At the Sorbonne University, she attends lectures by Léon Braunschweig and Émile Brechier. In January 1922, she became the first female with PhD at the University of Belgrade. A shorter version of her dissertation was published in 1922, and the entire work was printed in France in 1923. The subject is Giordano Bruno's teaching about the last indivisible parts of matter, a metaphysical, mathematical, philosophical work. Atanasijević's dissertation received excellent reviews in English, Italian and Czech journals. Her dissertation will also appear on the references list of Giordano Bruno in the Encyclopaedia Britannica.
The orientation of modern life, for the most part, brings grim outcomes of disasters that frighten our days more and more often. If anything, our age presents us, quite evidently and lavishly, what kind of incredibly monstrous forms the feeling of hatred can take.
During her dissertation defense, Atanasijević faced a series of prejudices and stereotypes from the male members of the scientific community. Nevertheless, in 1923, she became the first female assistant professor in the then Kingdom of Serbs, Croats and Slovens, and began working at the faculty in 1924. In 1928, when she was to be declared an associate professor, Ksenija faced a series of false accusations of plagiarism. Exclusively male university community disputed the scientific credibility of her works. During the events, Ksenija's civil rights were violated, which was reported to the public by law professor Živojin Perić. Professor Vladimir Dvorniković in Zagreb permanently refuted all accusations against Ksenija Atanasijević, demonstrating that the whole affair was false and fabricated. During this period, in 1929 and 1931, Ksenija published her main philosophical work, Philosophical Fragments 1 and 2.
The economic but also the psychological situation in which we are living today has long since crossed the line where seriousness turns into tragedy. The turmoil and confusion of modern life is too painfully felt by every conscious member of humanity.
However, in 1936, after a series of petitions and public letters, Atanasijević permanently withdrew from the Faculty of Philosophy. She was left without a pension and any other income, and supported herself by translating. Only in 1938 and 1939 did she return to the civil service as a school inspector. From 1941 to 1945, during the occupation of Yugoslavia, Atanasijević withdrew from public life, publishing nothing. She refused to sign the appeal against the communists, a declaration issued in August 1941 by hundreds of Serbian intellectuals at the request of the collaborationist regime, which condemned the partisan uprising and urged obedience to German authorities. By distancing herself from this act of collaboration, she aligned with a minority of intellectuals who resisted pressure to denounce the resistance. Her civil service was revoked, so she was forced to sell things on the black market. In 1942, the Gestapo raided her apartment with a search warrant and an order for questioning due to accusations of aiding the partisans.
There is no doubt that a man who constantly exhausts himself in defending his position, sometimes even his bare life, will not be able to dedicate himself to some kind of higher commitment. In the same way, it is particularly clear to us that a nation that does not let go of its weapons does not manage to firmly establish its culture. Quarrels, conflicts, and wars systematically exhaust the endowment of both individuals and nations, and for the entire time during their course, they cut off any positive development.
Immediately after the war, Atanasijević was accused of collaborating with non-communist democratic politicians. One of the representatives of the post-war communist authorities even demanded her execution. During April and May 1946, she was imprisoned, and in 1947 the authorities banned her from public activity. Her books and articles were banned. The ban was revoked in 1952. Since 1953, Atanasijević has been active in cultural life again. She published translations of Spinoza's Ethics, Plato's Parmenides, and Aristotle's Organon. She held public lectures and published articles on philosophy and literature. In 1968, Atanasijević received an invitation to hold a course on the philosophy of Giordano Bruno at the University of Buffalo. The invitation was made by philosopher Antoinette Mann Patterson, who in her 1970 book The Infinite World of Giordano Bruno refers several times to Atanasijević's dissertation.
Working relentlessly to ensure that peace prevails among nations, feminists will consider their efforts redeemed if, in the future, they see the increasingly clear contours of an international accordance and harmony, which no delusion and no malevolence will be able to cast doubt on.
In 1972, the Philosophical Society of Serbia published a special issue of its journal dedicated to the philosophy of Ksenija Atanasijević. The same year, an English edition of her doctoral dissertation was published by a renowned American publisher. Ksenija Atanasijević bibliography includes over 550 units, from 5 books to over 55 philosophical studies, prefaces and afterwords, to articles in popular magazines. In her works, Atanasijević addressed both philosophical problems and issues of social emancipation, cultural development, artistic creativity and spiritual tradition. Her works were published in English, French, German, Italian and Bulgarian. In 2008 and 2011, Ljiljana Vuletic, studious researcher of Atanasijević's work and life, published 2 collections of Ksenija's essays titled Ethics of Feminism and Ethics of Courage. In that regard, her work and engagement really confirms that her feminism and pacifism were ethics of both feminism and courage. Ksenija Atanasijević died in 1981 in Belgrade.
When our imagination is full of joyful imagery, then we have conquered our fate. But when our dreams are ugly, then our fate has overcome us. If we live out and endure all our enthusiasm, inspiration and visions, we have successfully fulfilled the task of our life.
The gravesite of Ksenija Atanasijević was later excavated for administrative reasons, as she had no heirs and no one to maintain or pay for the burial plot. It is not known where her remains are today.
And it would be wonderful to liberate your soul at the peak of your ecstasy, at the highest burst of your bliss. To spend oneself in one miraculous moment is more heroic and far brighter than to offer oneself to long and slow sacrifices.